Without further ado, I'm so excited to bring in our next speaker because it's on another one of those creatures that a lot of people might not know that much about, but are really, really special and charismatic. And so we are joined live by Katie Schuler, and she is the founder and head of production of Coral and Oak Studios. And she has my absolute dream job. She gets to go around the planet partnering with amazing organizations to shed light on the work that they're doing through the power of film. Her most recent big production, Pangolins, has been watched by millions of people around the world and features one of the iconic speakers we had on just yesterday, Dr. Mark Ofua. So we're going to learn a little bit about all the work she's done to help promote such amazing initiatives. We're going to learn a lot about pangolins, and we're going to have a really good time. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining us today, Katie. And come on in. How you doing? Hi, unmute your mic though. It's like our classic video call bingo. There we go.
Yay! Sorry about that. Hi,
That's
Jesse.
Okay. Hi, nice to see you again. It's so nice to have you as part of our BioFest. This is awesome.
It's such a pleasure to be a part of it. It's such an incredible event, and so happy to hear about Mark's talk yesterday. Did you guys get to see a pangolin?
We did. We had a pangolin on his shoulder, like licking in his ear. It looked like he kept having to sort of bat it away. It's some of the best footage of the entire festival. So thank you so much for helping make that possible too. That was great.
That's amazing. There's like nothing else like it.
So no live pangolins in your talk we should be worried about sneaking up the walls or anything like that, or no?
Nope, just pictures and video, unfortunately. That's why you've got Mark, you know.
That's why we've got Mark. Well, your pictures and video are extraordinary. As I said, you get to do this for a living, and it is so, so cool. So I'm excited to dive in with your talk and share some of the stuff you've been up to.
Awesome, Jesse. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm excited to share as well. Should I go ahead and share my screen?
Go for it. Yeah, let's take it away.
Okay. Let's see here.
Right.
How's that look?
Beautiful.
Awesome. Awesome. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about my story and how I got started as a wildlife storyteller. And then we'll dive into the pangolin a little bit and why it's one of my favorite animals on the earth. And then we'll talk about one of my more recent stories featuring Mark Ofua, which if you saw Mark's talk yesterday, you'll know a little bit about him. And so yeah, for those of you who don't know about Mark, I'm excited to share more about this incredible pangolin conservation hero located in Nigeria. So a little bit about me. You know, I am very lucky with the projects that I've worked on over the last 15 years since I started out, and you know, I get to see some amazing things. This is some of the highest coastal mountain ranges in the world, actually the highest coastal mountain ranges in the world. This is the Santa Marta mountain range in northern Colombia. Incredible bird species. This is me flying Nebby, my little drone, up in the Arctic. It's very cold there. This is me in an airplane, a very tiny airplane, very loud. And I had to be very careful not to stick my camera too far out the window or else it would get swept away. And pretty much right after this photo was taken, I had to look for a barf bag because we started circling this mountain and it was not agreeing with my stomach. So it's not all fun and games, but sometimes I have to disguise myself. I don't know how well of a job I'm doing in this photo, but yeah, sometimes it's very hot, sticky, lots of bugs, which is something I'm okay with. And sometimes, you know, I have to hide myself from the animals like you just saw, but other times when I'm in a rescue situation or we're doing scientific research, I can get really close to some of the animals, like here where I'm filming a bundle of pangolins that are being released. And, you know, this animal that we're going to talk more about, I've ended up making a lot of short films about them. And, you know, it's crazy to look back on all these things that I've done. And I ask myself, like, how the heck did I get to this place? And the answer is, you know, I really just started out like any other kid. I grew up in Florida. I had, you know, parents that thought I was just your normal little girl, that I liked Skipper Barbie, and they gave me this great 80s haircut and put me in dresses. But really, you know, what they would come to discover is that I was much more interested in holding a live animal like this amazing chameleon here than I was any Barbie doll. And this love, you know, I was very fascinated by nature, and I wanted to figure out a way to represent that visually. And so this was one of my very first cameras, or should I say my first 100 cameras. And I also tried illustration. So I was doing science illustration and all different kinds of art. And then I was also doing, continuing my photography all throughout high school and college. And at one point I went and did a study abroad in Australia. And that's when I found video. And I found that, I was trying to make this connection with my audience and share that amazing wonder and beauty in nature. And I wasn't quite making that connection until I started sharing my videos. And that's when I felt like I was really getting that feedback, that emotional connection that I wanted with my viewer, and for them to feel what I was feeling when I was looking at nature. So I thought, okay, I'm going to explore this more and see what I could do in terms of a video, using video as a tool. And I thought the best place to do that should be National Geographic. So I got an internship there. And it was actually a desk job, not very fun at all. But in my free time, I would take my portfolio and go on meetings with I think I met with 25 different people. And this one gentleman, Jason Orfanon, basically took me under his wing and took me to a couple different places. Here we are in the Amazon, and this is where I really got to shoot for Nat Geo and do some stories. And they ended up on PBS, and that kind of catapulted my career in this really lovely way. And I went on to become a National Geographic Explorer eventually, but that was a few years later. So, after, starting to really get my footing in this career, I thought maybe I was just going to work on wildlife, but then I realized, we live in a world where wildlife and people, they are always coming into contact. And so that intersection point was really interesting to me. And I thought that was more true to life. And those are the type of stories that I wanted to tell to help, bring us together in a cohesive way and a symbiotic way. And so that's how I ended up talking about the pangolin, which is unfortunately one of the world's most trafficked mammals and said to be the most illegally trafficked mammal in the world. And you're saying okay, what the heck is this animal? It looks like a walking artichoke or a cute pine cone. So the pangolin is the world's only scaled mammal. It's not related to sloths. It's not related to armadillos. Its closest relative is actually that of early carnivores. And they're the world's only scaled mammal. So they represent 70 million years of unique evolution. And I love this picture because he looks like he's about to ask someone to prom, but he's really shy. So here's the 8 different species that we have worldwide, and they're mostly in throughout Africa and Southeast Asia. And you have 4 species on the left and 4 on the right, and they're kind of cut down the center in terms of what they like to do. So half of them like to climb trees, and half of them like to hang out on the ground and dig holes. So some of the ground diggers, like this Temminck's pangolin, they are actually bipedal. So they walk like little T-Rexes with their arms held up like this, and then their big old legs propping up their bodies on the ground, and their tails act as a balance point. It's amazing. And then the tree climbers, they have incredible prehensile tails, just like possums, so they can hang upside down. They also have the world's longest tongue. You can actually see it in this illustration on the right side here. You can see it actually goes way back into their body. And imagine if your tongue was covered in super glue. That's how sticky their tongues are all the time. And so when they stick those tongues into termite mounds, which is their favorite food, they're insectivores, they eat ants and termites. When they bring their tongue back out, it's got all these ants and termites stuck to it. And they eat tons and tons of ants and termites. So that definitely helps keep the environment in check. Here's a baby pangolin. This is just adorable, so I had to make sure it got in there. So the babies will ride on top of their moms until they're ready to leave. And they're solitary animals for most of the time. It's really hard to find them. It's really hard to research them. They're incredibly data deficient across the board. We need to know more about their ecology and more about what is needed to protect these animals in the wild. And so, their scales are what makes them unique. Why do they have scales? Well, they use it for protection. So when they're scared, they roll up into this impenetrable ball like this. And this is impenetrable to pretty much everything, including lions. So it just waits till the lions get bored, and then it'll unroll and walk off. So unfortunately, the very thing that makes them unique is also the reason why they're the most illegally trafficked, and why poachers and people are trying to take this animal from the wild. And basically, they often remove the scales, like you see here. This one little shot of scales is like 20 animals. And this is kind of like one of the worst images I could show you, but it is important to see because this is emblematic of this is actually just a small fraction of all the pangolins that are taken from the wild. And these are some of the pangolins that were confiscated from an airport where somebody was trying to smuggle them. And, it's just really sad to see. And so, I was really passionate to do something about this, to let people know. And back in 2014, when I first started working on this animal, I basically just wanted to get the word out because people didn't even know that the animal existed at that time. And so it was, basically about, hey, look at this incredible animal and understand that, it's worth saving. And, we're worried that it's going to go extinct before anybody knows it exists. So I made my first pangolin film. And then later on, I got some funding with National Geographic to go to Nigeria and basically document the trade from the moment the animal is taken from the wild in Africa, and then from the moment it's consumed to the moment it's consumed in China. And once I got on the ground, I ended up making a totally different story. So I'll play a little bit of footage. Don't worry about the sound. I'm just going to talk over this video. So this is actually a black-bellied pangolin. They have black skin and gold scales. They're absolutely gorgeous. Now we're seeing a white-bellied pangolin. They're both tree-climbing species. And there he is eating ants. And so we went there to kind of work with the different folks on the ground, working with the trafficking, and kind of counter trafficking efforts. There's a close-up of the scales. And while we were doing this, we actually had a driver that was just taking us around, and he was a local vet. And we started talking to him, and he was telling us basically, I actually go into the bushmeat markets and I rescue pangolins. Here's a pangolin that was being trafficked on the day we were there. And people, they'll eat pangolins. They think it's like a healthy animal to consume. And then they also traffic the scales, like you see here. So we were also working with customs agents, and we're seeing these crazy bags and bags and bags of scales. And Lagos, Nigeria is one of the largest exportation hubs of scales in the world. So we thought that that was kind of the epicenter and an important story to tell. And so, we're learning about this guy, Mark, and within 24 hours, we were like, okay, we need to change the whole story and feature this gentleman, Mark Ofua, which is featured here. And, in Nigeria, it's not a normal thing to appreciate wildlife, to understand what endangered or things going extinct means. And so Mark was just kind of seen as kind of a crazy person. Here, I think I have a little video that shows him in the markets here. So this is what the bushmeat markets look like. And here's Mark, very handsome gentleman. And he had his very small veterinarian clinic just for dogs and cats. But then he would go into the bushmeat markets where you have all kinds of crazy things, both dead and alive being sold. And he basically would just look around for animals that weren't going to be sold. Maybe they were babies or they were injured. And so he would basically talk with the merchants and convince them to either give him the animals. Like here, he's trying to talk to this woman about basically giving him over these pangolins, or he sometimes has to pay a small amount of money. But he's, over the years, he's building these relationships. And so people will just call him up and say, hey, I've got a baby. Why don't you come and pick it up? And this is while we were there. I think we actually were able to find 8 different pangolins. And so after he takes these pangolins, the first thing he does is he hydrates them because they're all incredibly dehydrated. Sometimes they haven't eaten or drinking anything in a week. They've just been in a rice bag. And the important thing I want everybody to understand here is that, these merchant sellers, the hunters, the poachers, these people are just trying to provide for their families. And they're just as much a victim of the demand for pangolins as the pangolins themselves. And so that's a part of the story that I try to point out. And I think it's important that we're hearing those voices as well. And ending on a high note, so this is a photo of Mark on World Pangolin Day last March. He opened up Nigeria and maybe all of West Africa's first pangolin conservation center, where he has this massive enclosure now where he can basically they just increased his ability to rehab pangolins tenfold. And now he can do it with more support, more medical devices and things you can see here. And he's just learning so much and doing such just a crazy amount of work to release pangolins now in a way that's efficient and working well. And he's actually seen a pangolin. I just got a message last week that a baby pangolin was born within the protected area, which is kept very secret. So people can't go back in and poach the pangolins. So yeah, it's just been a pleasure working with Mark. I actually named my son after him. And, I'm going to continue to work with Mark, and we actually have a screening. I think it actually happened yesterday. We did a screening of our film in Lagos, Nigeria. And so it's great that we can kind of use the film to help support Mark's work. And it's just great to have a happy story. And we're just going to continue, working on pangolin conservation as much as we can. I'll probably work on pangolins the rest of my life. And try to save them before they go extinct. So that's my work. Here's my contact information if anybody wants to reach out to me. There I am on Instagram. And then if anybody wants to support pangolins, the Pangolin Crisis Fund.org is an incredible organization, and they seek out kind of a rapid assessment of projects going on all over the world that are helping pangolins. There's a lot of scientific research that's being done that's really important to help us design conservation strategies. And so they're a really good go-between for supporting those different projects. So I highly support you guys check out the Pangolin Crisis Fund.
Fantastic. Kate, what an awesome presentation. And I'm still getting over the tongue going that far into the body. It's kind of terrifying. Very, very cool. And again, thanks so much for sharing Mark's work. Again, we got the chance to have him on the broadcast the other day, Pangolin Tongue and Ear. So it's been a nice chance to highlight this really, really special creature. And if people who are tuning in weren't aware of pangolins before, hopefully you get a chance to see how, just beautiful and wonderful creatures they are. And so thank you for such amazing films. Katie, to kick off, I'm going to shamelessly share a question from my mother, who's really keen on pangolins. You talked about them being trafficked, and so that, at least to me, implies illegality. Is it illegal to take pangolins from the wild? Is there a penalty for this? Or you sort of show them as being openly traded in the bushmeat market, so I'm curious what the situation is.
Yeah, there was a law passed with the IUCN. I think it was in 2001, and so they're considered protected worldwide as an endangered species. All 8 species are endangered. 2 of them are critically endangered. And so technically it should be illegal, but when you don't have places, on the ground working with enforcement, and you don't have those systems in place, or even, your authorities having the knowledge of the animal, what the scales look like, how to identify these things, it's really hard to enforce those rules. And that lack of knowledge is key. So if people know about these things and it's kind of an established thing and there's information out there, then they can start, enforcing the rules at a bare minimum, enforcing the rules, going to the bushmeat markets and basically, letting people know. And that's actually something that Mark does, is he goes into the bushmeat markets and educates people as he's doing rescues.
Well, I'm so curious about this because you highlighted the fact that now people will tell him, oh, we had a baby come take it from us, sort of thing. Is there a network of people that go through these markets and help them out, find these species and bring them to this rehab center, or what's the situation like?
Yeah, I mean, he'll just go himself into the markets, which is actually somewhat dangerous sometimes because people don't, like I said, it's very uncommon.
Yeah.
People don't see animals as these cute things. They see them as something, as sustenance, as something that they can eat and support their families and feed their families. So it's a strange environment to be in, and they still look at Mark with a question on their head, on their faces. But I think that that's starting to change. I think that he's got respect now in the community, and people are starting to understand that the pangolin can disappear from the wild. And so it's nice to see that narrative changing.
Yeah. Well, speaking of this sort of this backdrop, you said something in your presentation that I absolutely loved, and it's been a theme of a few of the presentations there at the BioFest, and that is that the poachers aren't bad people. They're people that are working to sustain their families. This is a way of making money. It's a way of ensuring a livelihood for yourself and those around you. And so one of the strategies that some of our other conservation leaders have talked about is working with the poachers, finding them a role to play in the conservation of these animals, because they know where to find them. They know how to, they know everything about their distribution and all these things. Is there any strategy like this in Nigeria to sort of bring over poachers to the other side, so to speak, that you know of?
That's a great, as you're saying it, I'm like thinking to myself, I should make some suggestions to Mark next time I talk to him. Because wouldn't it be cool if we, basically Mark started, if he had the funding, right?
Yeah.
And now he has the center all set up, and that's fairly recent. But now that he has this kind of home base, it would be so great if he could basically go out into the bushmeat markets and kind of like recruit market sellers and poachers. The real challenge though is money, honestly. So we would have to stay competitive with whatever they're making on a sale.
Right.
And so that's where the tricky part comes in. You have to make it worth, the while. And I think that's why it's kind of a big holistic effort, right? Because you kind of need a little bit of you need alternatives for livelihoods, but you also need that enforcement angle, so that they feel a little bit of pressure to stop, poaching and selling the animal. And I think the more we can kind of include their voices in the process and hear from them about what kind of things they need and things that would kind of convince them to switch over. Because these are things that like the poacher that we met, he's been, his father did that before him, and then his father did that before his father. So it's this multi-generational thing that people are just used to, and that's how they grew up, and they don't know anything else. So, there probably have to be job support and training. So, our support in Mark's efforts, I think, that would be an amazing program to implement, and I'm definitely going to talk to him about it. So this is great.
Well, very cool. We sort of two programs to look back on in our BioFest. We had Indira on talking about the Philippines and all the amazing work that they've been doing to protect the cockatoo. And then again, it started with bringing poachers on board, and they managed to get the funding to give it as an alternative job option. And again, unlike in Canada and the States and the UK, where a lot of our viewers have been from, in a lot of countries, the amount of money it requires to make that a possible alternative is very, very low. I've had the chance to go to Madagascar, where a typical wage is $1,000 Canadian a year. And I mean, that is a small sum for something like the international community to help support, to make sure that we protect these really integral species and habitats on a world scale. And, you mentioned enforcement too. John Scanlon was on the other day talking about, Africa parks, all the amazing work that's been done to make sure that you view poaching ivory, or you view taking a rhino horn, as a real disincentive to doing that. And it leads to a lot of positive good. So I think there's a lot here. This is very exciting. Time flies and you're having fun, Katie, but I wanted to ask one more question. You talked about the fact that this is the first such place in West Africa. Are there other pangolariums around the world? Like, is this something that you have in Asia and India or anywhere else?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple more. I think there's one being built in India. There's one in South Africa, I think near Johannesburg.
Yeah.
There's a couple in South Africa, actually. And yeah, there's more popping up all the time. So, like 2014, when I first started working on this, there was nothing like that. And so it's been incredibly, I'm incredibly humbled by the ability to kind of be a part of this first wave of awareness about this animal. And it's just really nice to see people coming together to try and protect it.
Well, you certainly do a fantastic job. I can say, like I did with Pablo Borboroglu the other day, the moment I first saw you come on one of our broadcasts in the past, I finished it up and donated straight to pangolin conservation. So your message is spreading. It's very captivating.
Yeah.
I want to bring up on the screen too, pangolincrisisfund.org, and I think I got that all correct. Yeah. People should check that out. It's an amazing resource to help this really, really amazing animal. And Katie shared her links to her own social media accounts, website, and more at the end of her broadcast. But check out Coral and Oak Studios. Just amazing stuff, amazing footage. And so thank you so much for joining us for the BioFest today, Katie.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Jesse. Enjoy and good luck. I know it's a long, nonstop, amazing.
5 more hours. 5 more hours to go. We're almost there.
You got this.
Thank you so much. Keep up the amazing work, and we look very forward to having you on in the future.
Awesome, Jesse. Thank you so much.
Bye for now, Katie.